Hi everyone, my name's Alice from Discover AI, and today I'm going to walk through another Power BI DAX for Enviro's DAX pattern. So this time it's all about analyzing groundwater pumping volumes and showing how we can use DAX to really easily calculate the cumulative total volume and then use this measure to compare against something like your groundwater license entitlement. So let's take a step back and have a look at the scenario that we're working with today. So let's imagine that I'm a water resource manager of a small town where my primary water supply comes from 3 groundwater bores. So I'd like to visualize my annual groundwater usage just to see how I'm tracking compared to my groundwater extraction license. So let's take a look at our data. Here you can see that we've got a very simple data model, a nice star schema with our groundwater pumping table as our fact table and our 2-dimension tables, one for date and one for bore details. And if we have a look at maybe our groundwater pumping table, you can see that we've got data here for different dates for our 3 different bores. And also we're tracking the extraction volume here. So this is weekly data. If we have a look at our bore details, we've got different details of the 3 groundwater bores. And also we have an annual licensed extraction volume here. So let's head on over to the report view and start thinking about the different type of DAX functions that we can write. And for this scenario, I want to introduce DAX time intelligence functions. So time intelligence functions make calculating trends over time a breeze in Power BI. And today we'll explore the total YTD or year-to-date function to see how we can easily compute the cumulative total usage for the calendar year. And also for the financial year, which is something that we use quite often in water resource reporting. But before we do that, let's have a quick look at what the data looks like in a time series chart. So here I've got a line and cluster column chart on the canvas. I'm just going to bring date into my x-axis and just drag in the extraction volume for the column. So we can see here that we've got the extraction volume for the 3 different bores. It's just summed up by default, or we can select the individual bores here. So this is useful for seeing, this is the weekly extraction data here, but it is really hard to know what our cumulative total annual usage is just by having a look at our data here. So let's go ahead and insert a measure to calculate this. We want to insert a new measure into the groundwater pumping table. So I right-click on the table and click New Measure. And we're going to call this measure Cumulative Groundwater Usage. And the function we're using today is a time intelligence function called Total YTD. So this evaluates some expression over the interval which begins on the first day of the year and ends on the last day of the year for the dates which we've specified. So we can see that we've got 2 required inputs here. We've got the expression and our dates. So let's have a look at that. So what is our expression? What we want to do is we want to calculate the sum of our groundwater usage over the year. So our first expression will be the sum of our groundwater extraction volume. So we're just adding it up. And then we just have to tell Power BI over what dates do we want to add that up. So we've got a date table in our model. So we're going to add it up over the dates of the date table. And we're going to ignore those last 2 remaining parameters for now because they're optional. And we'll just see what we get with this result here. So we press enter, we can see that we've got our DAX measure here. But because it's a measure, we can't see the actual data behind it until we bring it into a visual on the report canvas. And the best place for troubleshooting and debugging DAX is in a matrix view. But first, actually, let's add it into our time series chart because I think that cumulative totals are really quite a visual concept. So I'm going to bring this into the line y-axis. So you can see we've got our cumulative total. It's put on the secondary y-axis just so we can compare because these scales are quite different. And if we zoom into a period, got a lot of data here. What we can see is if we hover over around close to the start of the year, you can see that our cumulative groundwater usage is 2.4 megaliters, and then it's increasing over time here. And then it resets at the next calendar year as well. If we wanted to take a closer look at these calculations and just really understand what's happening behind the scenes, that's where visualizing your DAX in a matrix is really helpful. So here we've got a matrix visual. I'm going to bring the date into the rows, and then I'm going to drag into the columns, or to the values, sorry, just my extraction volume. You can see this is an implicit measure. We haven't written a DAX measure to calculate the sum of the extraction volume. If we click on the drop down, this allows us, just like a pivot table in Excel, to very easily change whatever statistic or aggregation you want to visualize for your implicit measures. So we've got our extraction volume there, and then we've got our cumulative groundwater usage here. So this is a little bit hard to review at this stage, so I might bring in the year, maybe the month as well, and we can expand this out. So what we can see is at the annual total, our total extraction volume is the same for extraction volume and cumulative usage. This is what we would expect because at the sum of the year, we want these two values to be the same. But it's when we have a look at, these are the months here and then maybe the individual dates, that's where the differences arise. So you can see that we've got our weekly data, whenever it was recorded. Here we've got two different volumes, and what the cumulative usage does, exactly like what it sounds, it just adds these up over the year. And then when we get to the end of, or the first of the new year, what we've just designated as the 1st of January, the totals match, they've reset. So that's just understanding what is happening behind the scenes of this calculation. But what if we didn't want to add up our data over the calendar year? What if we wanted to maybe calculate the cumulative total for a different time period? Maybe it's a irrigation season or a financial year. That's where these two optional parameters come into it. So I've just navigated to the DAX documents in Microsoft Documents here, and we're having a look at the function total year to date. And this is a really good resource for exploring different DAX expressions. So they provide an overview of what the function is, lots of comments, examples, and related DAX patterns as well. But what we want to have a look at here is what the inputs are for the second two optional parameters here. So you can see that we will be referencing the column or the table which we want to apply our new kind of time period over. And then we also have to tell Power BI what the end date is. So here we have visited the Microsoft DAX documents just to see what the syntax is, because sometimes it's not so intuitive. So we can see what the syntax is here for writing what the end date of that year is. So let's head back over to Power BI, and we'll just update this function here. So our next parameter is the filter. So we want to apply this over our dates table. I'll do it over the entire date column. And then we just have to designate what the end year or end date is. So ours will be the 30th of June. And if we have a look at this, you can see that what we've got here is we've got the calendar years in here for this matrix table. And now our data doesn't match up, because if we have a look at our visual in action here, we can see that the cumulative total, it resets in January, oh, in July, sorry. So that's at the start of the new financial year. So if we have a look at our matrix here, we can swap out year for financial year, and then our totals should match up. So we've calculated our groundwater cumulative usage, but really what we wanted to do was we wanted to compare it against our annual license entitlement volume. So in our visual here, we can bring in our annual license entitlement volume. We'll just make that another line on our y-axis. You can see when I've brought it in here, Power BI has its best guess of visualizing this data and aggregating it in the way that it thinks it should be aggregated. So Power BI has designated this as a count. And this is why writing DAX measures is so important. We can explicitly state how we want Power BI to aggregate our data up. If we wanted to, we can just change this implicit measure to be sum here. Or another good place to change is in the summarization, the default summarization. We can change this to be sum here as well. And then when we bring this into a visual, it will automatically sum up the data for us. So we can see visually here that a couple of years were above the license entitlement volume, but we can also write a DAX measure to track this as well. So we can insert a new measure, and we'll call this remaining license volume, and this will just be the sum of our annual license extraction volume minus our cumulative groundwater usage. So this will be tracking how much license we've got remaining over the year. And on our chart here, we could bring that into maybe into our tooltip so that we can see it on hover, and then we can just assess how much remaining license we've got. We can also bring it into our visual here. We could drag in our annual license volume, so that's just the total yearly volume, and then have a look at what is our remaining license entitlement. So we could drill into the different kind of months and years and see how this is tracking downwards as well as we're using more groundwater. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this short DAX pattern all about having a look at calculating our cumulative groundwater usage and comparing it to our annual license extraction volume. If you're keen to learn more about how you can visualize your environmental data in Power BI, then be sure to sign up for our Power BI for Enviro's monthly meetup group, keep following along on our blog and YouTube channel, or reach out to one of the team at Discovery Eye to learn more about our training and consulting packages. So thanks so much for watching, and have fun playing around with DAX in Power BI.